Welcome to Brave with Lisa YouTube channel. My name is Lisa Bruton and my goal is to inspire you to live bravely in that unique rhythm of grace that God has designed just for you. On this channel, we are going to be hearing from amazing people from all different walks of life who are bravely walking in that unique rhythm of grace and calling that God has designed just for them. I know that as we hear their stories, we are going to learn a lot. We're going to find keys that are going to help us to also walk bravely in that unique rhythm of grace and that unique calling that God has just for you and for me. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Brave with Lisa YouTube channel. My name is Lisa Bruton and today I have the lovely Tam Russell with me. Tam's over in South Africa with her husband and her children. They're doing some incredible things over there and I can't wait to hear more about her story. So welcome, Tam.
Oh, thanks, Lise. So lovely to see you.
It's wonderful to see you. Tam, can you tell us a little bit about what your world looks like at the moment and what you're passionate about?
Oh my goodness. I feel like my world probably looks like what most people's world looks like. It's a bit stop-starty depending on what COVID's doing. So in South Africa, we have probably had about a year and a half of different lockdowns and mask wearing. And it's just one of those seasons where it's actually hard to know exactly what things are going to look like in a few months' time. It's hard to plan. So in terms of my world, I am homeschooling one child and I have one child in actual school, and we are waiting for some land that we bought 2.5 years ago, or put a deposit on anyway 2.5 years ago. We're waiting for that to transfer so that we can actually build a home, because we only moved back to South Africa after living overseas for about 18 years. We moved back in 2018. And in 2019, we bought some land when we decided we were going to settle. And so we're waiting to actually get going with our own home. And in the meantime, living with family, which has gone on for way longer than any of us ever thought. But it's been really lovely. And we've definitely caught up on this time from all our years living overseas. But yeah, I feel like there's a bit of waiting on the home front and a bit of just navigating the nature and climate of the current world that we find ourselves in. And then at the same time, amazing God stories of taking on a new church and a new school that we rent, the building that we use for church too, and taking on new friendships and new relationships, and just seeing what the God story of church is going to look like on the other side of COVID. And so there's new things too. I don't know. That's a really muddly answer, but maybe that's a reflection of what our world looks like. It just looks like a bit of this and a bit of that, Lise. And I forgot the second part of the question. I can't even remember what the second part was.
What are you passionate about?
So honestly, I think that at different times in my life, I would have answered that always as that we're passionate about just people and church and seeing people whole and healthy. But I would definitely add to that mostly we just are passionate about doing what God is actually asking us to do at this very moment in time, as the story of the world unfolds and as chapters change and things evolve. And just passionate about my family, my kids and my husband, and close friendships, just wanting for those to be really solid and healthy and whole, while we are about the business of advancing the kingdom of God. Just keeping those two things in balance is definitely my focus and my passion. And then a million other things, because we're girls and we're multitasking.
That's so true. I love that. Fun story that I wanted to share with people was how I came to know you.
So, oh my goodness, yes.
So for me, I actually met your husband first, Bev.
Yeah.
So I was on a plane. God had told me to go to Colour, which was it's a Hillsong women's conference. And we were on such a shoestring budget at the time, and in a really tricky time in my life as well. There was lots of really tough stuff going on. And so I'm on the plane, and I think we land at 6:30 at night, and the Colour starts at 7 that night. And I was sitting on the plane and I'm going, God, I don't have much money, so do I pay for a taxi so I don't miss what you have for me, or should I just get a bus to my accommodation, save money, and just start the conference tomorrow? And he just said, I've got it covered. And I was like, what does that mean? Anyway, while I was on the plane, I noticed this man with his 2 beautiful children. And I remember thinking, I bet you his wife is just wonderful. I bet you I could be friends with her. I don't know why I thought that. I just noticed this man with his 2 kids. Anyway, the plane lands and I'm walking off over the tarmac, and this man with his 2 kids comes up and he said, are you going to Colour? And I said, yes. And he said, do you want a lift? And I went, yes. And that was God taking care of me. And I started shaking because I was so overwhelmed with how God answered my prayer. And this Bev had no idea just how ordained that moment was. And then so I got to know him and your kids. And then not too soon after that, I got to meet the beautiful you. And that was on the Sunshine Coast, and you were pastoring Hillsong in Noosa.
Yeah, I know.
Wild.
It was crazy, actually. Hey, I feel like but you, part of the story was also, I feel like you had a word for us in our season. Do you remember saying that you had felt like God had said you need to meet that man's wife? And we did coffee. Is that how the story went? It's a few years ago now. And you actually you gave us such a word in season. We were at a stage where it was, I can't remember how long we had been pastoring Hillsong Noosa, but it was a pioneer project, as a lot of the time the things that find us are pioneer projects. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of mess when you're digging new ground to be taken. And I feel like within that space that we were living in, we were getting such crazy migraines, and we had never gotten migraines before. Do you remember this? And and it was like we started to work out that whoever was preaching the next day would just have this crazy migraine on the Saturday. And you gave us an incredible word, and you were like, oh, there's actually strategy within that, and there's a real enemy attack on you guys personally as a couple. And so we just were I don't know, really refreshed that God would actually send somebody who we didn't even know to speak right into our situation. And we should have known all along that you're supposed to take authority over that kind of stuff, of course, and live above it. But it just reminded us, and we never got migraines from that point on, according to like whoever was speaking. It just didn't interrupt with our preparation and with our the time that you set aside to hear from God, to be able to bring a now word to the people that you're pastoring. So you were a gift to us.
Oh, that's so lovely. I love how God does that. So I would love to kind of unpack a bit, Tam, how you went from pastoring Hillsong in Noosa, which is a beautiful community and place to live, and then to where you are now. And can you give us a little bit of behind the scenes?
Oh my gosh, I feel like this is going to be a long answer, so just keep like talking to me and tell me that I'm staying on track or going off track. So what are we in? We're in 2021. It might have been 2015 or 2016 when we visited South Africa. We were living in Noosa, pastoring Hillsong Noosa, like you said, had the most beautiful, beautiful friends who we still miss. And of course, living in like paradise, we find ourselves like a fair bit homesick for our Noosa home every now and then, because it is a very special part of the world, like you said, with very, very special people. But we always knew in our heart that we were going to need to serve our homeland one day. There was something in us that could not let go of South Africa. And I mean, people know bits and pieces of South Africa, but it's a hard country to work out in its entirety because of just how complex the history has actually been. And so, depending on what South African you meet, you end up with a snippet of what that history actually looked like. But basically, South Africa today is living in the aftermath of some crazy hurt and mistrust and strong leadership that perhaps even abused certain people groups, and then new leadership that has tried to free people, but at the same time corruption and tension, and just there's dynamics in this land. And so we hadn't lived here for 18 years. We had visited throughout our time of living overseas. And we have family, all of our family are here. And so we were up to speed to a certain extent with what this nation would be like to live in, and had always, like I say, carried it in our hearts. But in 2015 and 2016, when we visited, we actually went to the Colour Conference, that conference you was just speaking about, but the conference that's held in Cape Town. And I went because it's for women. Bevan was surfing his way down the coast, and he was going to meet me in Cape Town. We're at the end of the conference, and I feel like in somewhere in the middle of that conference, I had a moment where God just said to me, I need you here now. This is the time, you've carried it in your heart. There is complexity, there's natural fears and whatever that people carry towards this land. But we know, like, as Jesus people, we can't run away from mess. We're supposed to be right in the thick of it, to be part of a solution. And so it was just a moment that I had. And honestly, in that moment, it was, I just remember actually already crying at the thought of coming home, for one, and how beautiful that feeling is, because we never immigrated. We just, Bevan and I met in London, and we were in London for different reasons, just as young kids, exploring, traveling, whatever. And we just had ended up being away from our homeland for as long as we had. So we had never immigrated, we had never left. So the thought of coming home was beautiful, but at the same time, there was this tension of, oh my goodness, I'm already grieving saying goodbye to Australia, because we absolutely loved our life in Australia. Our kids grew up there. We arrived when our daughter was 2 and our boy was 3 months old. And so really that was their home. And the friendships that we had formed there just, we're like family, honestly still are. And I could get emotional talking about it, because there's so many people that I miss. And, and it's not like you're living in a neighboring country where you can just pop across easily for a week or 2 here or there. Like, we knew we were going to be far away. And so there was this grief over what our life looked like there. But at the same time, this, oh my goodness, like, we'd be coming home, and we'd be coming home to family and this thing that we've carried in our hearts. And so I shared the word with Bev when he had surfed his way down to me, and it resonated with him. But at the same time, there was a fear that he has spoken of that just gripped him immediately, because again, you're coming to a country of complexity. We would be coming to a country where the time and season that this country is in, there are certain demographics that are empowered in a nation like South Africa, and then there's certain demographics that actually can be harder for you just to access a job or to make your way into a system like you maybe can a little bit easier in other countries. And so we were just really aware that there was less of a safety net for us in a nation like South Africa. And so this really had to be God for us to move in our late 30s and bring our 2 children to a nation where everybody was telling us that we were crazy. If we were going to do that, we were going to be crazy, because why would we do it to our kids? And of course that stabs you in the parent heart. Aren't we thinking about our kids' future? Aren't we thinking about our own future? There's so much negativity that is spoken over a nation like South Africa, again, by certain people, not by everyone. But the language, if you like, is that nothing flourishes in Africa. everything seems to spiral downward. And so why would we leave an incredible nation like Australia and bring our kids to somewhere that is going to spiral downward? So Bevan talks about a fear that like completely gripped him, and that he had to actually just navigate and process and deal with, and had to get to a point where he knew, where it wasn't just me. I knew I had heard from God. It was so sure in me. Like I said, like I was already grieving the saying goodbye. It was that sure. But obviously I'm in a marriage. And so in a marriage, like God would never, he's not going to, he's not going to call me without my husband. And so sometimes there's a patient process just in both of you actually hearing and coming into the same rhythm of what God is speaking. And so Bev prayed, like there was another conference. Obviously we're on staff at Hillsong Church. And so conferences came every 6 months or so into our life. And so Hillsong Conference in 2016, Bev had been very specific with God and had just said, I really need a word, God. Like, actually, I need a few words, because this is what's on my list with what, like, there's real fear of me as a man taking my family, like, to a nation that everyone's poo-pooing, the move. And I just need I need you to go through, I need you to deal with that fear, like legitimately. And I need you to speak into this and this and this. And he said, and also I need for there to be outside confirmation that starts to come in. I even need for the conversation to even be started. We would obviously need to have a conversation with our employers, which were Hillsong Church at the time. And we knew that once that conversation started, the ball was going to be rolling, because because there's a people group in Noosa to look after, and we would want the best, and Hillsong Church would want the best for them. And so if our hearts were being called elsewhere, it would be a very quick conversation, let me just say, of okay, well, who's gonna love these people and shepherd these people going forward. And so very quickly we knew we were going to have to roll with the call. So Bevan didn't want to be the person that actually initiated that conversation. He asked for, he was like, God, I pray that it's going to be initiated for me, Anyway, we went into that Hillsong conference and we had some crazy words. Please excuse my crazy hair. Oh my gosh. I had that like home bun going on and just ripped it out as we started. Lise, so we go into that conference and it feels like God speaks straight into the fear element straight away, literally. Like we have people giving us words. We have it from the platform, even moments where people are like, I really feel like I'm needing to speak into fear, specific fear. And so for Bevan, that was profound. And a list of other things, things that were personal to him, close to him. And we have a moment with a couple who were really just our best friends in Noosa. We hadn't really done like a lot of ministry life together with them. In fact, it's hilarious because they always said they would never do our jobs. They would never be pastors. They feel like that's the hardest job in the world. And so they were just really beautiful friends to us. Our kids were amazing friends. And we had this moment with them in the conference where we're all hugging each other and just crying, knowing that, emotional. Just knowing that our season of life, see how much I love them.
And I'm like crying.
Oh man, we just knew that we had been knitted together in a beautiful, like sweet friendship, that it was a gift of family to us and to them in a season where we were both new to the coast. But we knew that season, for some reason, we didn't understand how. Well, I feel like I understood that we were going away. They actually thought that they felt like they were being called into ministry and could not understand it. And they thought that they were going away. So they were all hugging each other like crazy, just knowing that, oh my gosh, we're going to be saying goodbye to this friendship. Well, not goodbye, but just goodbye to the day-to-day of it. I can't believe I'm so emotional. This is years ago. And anyway, so that starts unfolding. And then just after the conference, we get a message from Jules Abel, who would have been looking after Hillsong Australia. And out of all the pastors that are on staff at Hillsong Church, he feels to send a message to us to say, guys, what did God say to you in that conference? And I'm all, oh, maybe they're just being like the most beautiful bosses and pastoral people ever and asking everyone, you know what I mean? Like it's their duty to. My response was, I kind of need to know whether this is just a work question or whether this is a God prompt, because this is actually what Bevan's prayed for, for this to be initiated, you know? So more, Jules, thank you for asking. So kind. I feel like you said loads. Can I just ask, are you just asking us or are you asking everyone and stuff? Just you guys, she says. So at that point, I'm all, Bev, we need to just answer truthfully, you know, because there's always a God story evolving on the planet, and he works through people. And so unless we're obedient to what he's trying to say and do, you know, we're actually thwarting the plan of God. And so anyway, the conversation started, and Joel and Jules were amazing through the process. They understood how much we love Noosa. They understood how much we cared for the people and how hard it was for us to have that conversation, but at the same time, how we were just genuinely trying to be obedient. And so that ball started rolling, and it, you know, it needed to be done right on all fronts. And so there was a period of time that passed, and the crazy thing is, on James and Jane, who I've mentioned, are really good friends. One day after I think I had spoken at church, and again, I'm crying through worship, and everyone might have thought that I was just crying because I was lost in the presence of God, which I was, but I was again just grieving these people that we had loved and invested into for, you know, I think it would have been 5.5 by the time we left, 6.5 years. And so that afternoon I come home and I say to Bev, babe, I just cried my eyes out in worship today. Like the thought of leaving these people is hard for me. And he's all, I know. And anyway, then he pulls out his book. I say to him, I feel like I had a moment in that service though, when I looked up and God was trying to just still my pastor heart and assure me that these people were going to be just fine. And that James Coyle and his beautiful wife Jamie were going to pastor these people. And it was the strangest moment because he was leading worship. And when I looked up, I was asking God, I was going, could you just show me who's going to care for them? Because then it's easier, you know, it's easier to know that's going to be fine. And so we can move on to what you're asking us to, God. And I felt like as I looked up and Jane was leading worship, that God had said to me, they're going to pastor. And that didn't make any sense because they'd never shared with us. The only thing they'd ever shared with us is that they would never pastor. And so I come home and I share this with Bev. I share my emotion and I share my moment. And he doesn't say anything to me. I'm all, it's not cool. It's not, you know, like me. But he goes and gets his journal out. And earlier that year, before we had even been to South Africa and had this moment, he had written in his journal, James and Jane, campus pastors, and he hadn't understood it, and he hadn't he was like, that didn't make sense to him because again, they actually weren't even in our like connect group, in our circle of leadership team. Like I say, they were our really good mates, and we were thinking, maybe we were talking about starting another campus just further down the coast. And so he thought, maybe that's what it meant, maybe for further down the coast, but we were starting to work out what it did mean, really. And I went to a little tea party with them that afternoon. Their daughter was just having a birthday, and it was literally just the three of us, James, Jane, and myself. Evan was preparing a message for that night, chatting, and I knew I couldn't tell them what I had experienced because I didn't want to manipulate the situation. You know, we can do that, like in God, we can hear something and it's just not time to say it yet. And but that, we have this moment where they're in a space and they're feeling like, man, what's going on with life? And I'm just chatting to them, and as I'm chatting, they look at me and they go, Tam, we don't even know what's going on. We just feel like life is changing and we're called to pastor and we can't make sense of it because we love you guys and we want to be with here on the coast. And in my heart, I'm all, oh man, this is so crazy. But then, Lise, the thing is as well, in a church like Hillsong Church, there's organization, you know, because there's got to be structure when things are of a certain size. And so we knew that we would have a conversation about who might, you know, take things on from us. But ultimately, it could not have been our decision, you know, and it actually wasn't our decision. And so there's a series of things. I mean, I could keep you here all day and I don't want to do that, but there's this beautiful series of things that evolved, which actually led to Joel and Julia saying, we think James and Jane should be the campus pastors of Hillsong Noosa when you step out. And in that moment, like, God just had shown us really in advance so that we could rest and then let go, knowing we were let going to beautiful people, and then at least start to anticipate what it was, what the new thing was that God was going to be leading us into. And then, I don't know, how am I doing for time? Are you going to edit some of this out because it's so long?
Tim, because there's so much gold in that. It's even just like being honest with God and even saying, I need you to confirm, and he's confirming and he's doing it in a gentle way. He's looking after your pastor's heart. Like, just, I think it's
kindness.
Keep going.
Kindness. I mean, the crazy with that, like, do you know what the crazy thing is? We actually, Jamie was having a surf one day when we were still like, okay, we've almost got our flights booked and we still don't know. It's not been announced who's going to be the campus pastors. But my heart could rest because I knew what I'd heard, you know, and we're just sort of waiting on conversations with Joel and Jules, and when is it actually going to be announced? When are we going to be able to tell people what's going on? And, you know, because you want people to just to be good. That's what you want. Yeah. And Joel Abel talks about how he had this moment in the surf. It was so random. He was surfing in Noosa, which didn't happen often because he lives in Sydney, and Jamie happened to be in that same surf spot at the same time. And in that moment, it's like God said to him, yeah, that's it, you know. They got chatting, and and so there's just these beautiful God stories, how God cares for his people, and he cares for us who also care, you know. And so as that unfolded, it was beautiful, and I feel like we knew that God was in it. We knew that we weren't leaving or abandoning, that we were actually, you know, being obedient, and that God had asked us to start something, but somebody else was going to continue it, and we just loved the people who were going to. And so there was just like a really beautiful transition. And then we gave ourselves 6 months of travel, which I highly recommend. And we decided that, you know, we made a little bit of money off the house that we sold, and we were wise in keeping some to be able to buy a house in South Africa, and whatever, you know, you've got to work out your finances, like the real practical things of when big transitions are happening. And so we just ended up with a bit of margin that we hadn't anticipated. And we just thought, oh my goodness, when Bevan and I got married, we did an around the world trip. We bought around the world tickets, and we took 6 months out of our life in London, and we just traveled because we hadn't traveled together before. Like, other people were just traveling, and we were like, oh, we're going to have to rent 2 different hotel rooms. That's not great on the budget, you know. We weren't going to share a hotel room. And so we just decided we were going to save all our money, and we were going to travel together, like just do it in a 6-month dash, you know, when we got married. And so it was so much fun doing it. Well, fun and interesting on a marriage, when you go from like living in 2 different places to now just being like this.
Maddie and I did the same thing.
Did you? I didn't know that. Oh my goodness. Okay, so like it's like your marriage goes from, you were only married 6 months, but it felt like you were married 5 years, because you just had so much time together and learned all kinds of things that you never knew about the person before. Hey. But we always said then, we were like, this would be the most incredible thing to do with kids one day, because of how spacious it is and how educational it is. And I was a school teacher when we got married, and so education is something that runs strong in me. And you just don't know how, like, you just don't think it's going to be possible. Like, how could you take another 6 months out of life when you do have kids and just travel? But it's so beautiful how that little prayer when we got married, you know, like God is so attentive to our prayers, and just those little things, like he hears and he finds a way to answer and reward us. Hey, so we traveled for 6 months with this margin that we hadn't anticipated. And because we were now going to be leaving Australia, arriving in South Africa, and going to a job in Hillsong Church in South Africa that we had had conversation about before, and we had kind of worked out what would be the best landing spot for us in South Africa, to be able to sort of just find why we felt this strong pullback at that time. And so the best landing spot for us was going to be to go to Cape Town, which is where Hillsong Church, I don't want to say headquarters, but I guess the core campus of what happens in South Africa. Things kind of run from Cape Town, and we just thought the smartest thing to do would be to get to know the team there. You know, like it's a team dynamic if you're on staff in Hillsong Church. And so while there was the option of going straight to where we currently are, where we now live, which is close to Durban, which is where all of our family are, Bevan and my family, we had the option of just taking Hillsong Church straight there. It was a conversation that we had before. But we really felt like we needed to just know and understand the team dynamic. And so we asked to come to Cape Town, and then to see whether maybe we would go on to Durban, or whether we would find our fit in Cape Town. And if anyone knows anything about South Africa, Cape Town is like the promised city of South Africa. That's where everyone reckons you got to live if you live in South Africa. And so it was worth a try, Lise. It was worth a try. But as it turned out, it was probably our space where we figured out that, oh my goodness, this wasn't just a change of country. This was a whole change of like everything, of rhythm, of, you know, what we had been part of for so long and what we knew so well. So yeah, we did our 6 months of travel, landed in Cape Town, had organized for our kids to go straight into school so that we could just get on with the jobs that we were arriving to. And honestly, it just, that travel time leading up to Cape Town, that space, we just started to almost discern and know that more than we were anticipating was going to be required of us in terms of change upon change upon change. And once we had already just made the decision in our hearts that actually this was what God was asking in terms of us leaving Australia and going back to South Africa, I actually started having these birth dreams, and I knew that I was not having a third child naturally. I knew that this was spiritual birth, okay? So I'd had maybe 1 or 2, 3 even, actually. And then I was just driving home from the school run. This is going back to Australia. I know I'm hopping around, but it all just meshes in God, hey? So I'm driving back from the school run one day, and my phone rings, and I could see who it was phoning me. And normally you can leave it and just phone that person back, but I just felt to pull over and answer the phone and take that phone call. So I pull over and I answer the phone, and it's one of the prophetic girls in Hillsong Noosa. Her name's Nikki Toomey. She's pretty epic. But she's all, oh my goodness, I have had this word to pass on to you for so long, and it's felt a bit silly because it's one word, and it's but I feel like I'm just being disobedient if I don't give it, and so I'm just phoning you now, and I'm telling you that God is saying to you, baby. And I'm all, man, I've just been dreaming about birthing babies. And I knew they were God dreams. I knew they were like, there was a spiritual message in them. But I need to start writing these dreams down now, because there's obviously, you know, there's stuff you can forget if you don't write it down in the moment. And God's trying to say something to you, and you know, we can just get busy with what we know and what is normal to us, and he's actually trying to speak something new into us. And so I'm all, oh, okay, yeah, got it, next, got it. I'm not so I start writing my dreams down, and Lise, when I tell you I had that many birthing dreams, it was weird. Like, I had 2 emergency C-sections, so I actually didn't give natural birth. So but these dreams were natural birth dreams, and they they started in one place where things were pretty easy. And let me tell you, I feel like I gave birth to a toddler in the first dream. This child was massive. And I'm all, what is that? And it was so easy, and there was no emergency C-section. And I'm all, this sounds great. This dream sounds amazing. Who doesn't want to give birth to a massive, healthy baby? And it was just like, it was so easy. But then the birth dreams were changing, okay? And it was almost like, I don't know, when I look back at it now, it was almost like God gave me the dreams in reverse, that it was going to end up there. But actually, there was going to be a series of moments that would take me to that place. Because by the time I had my last birth dream, we were on our travel. We were in Mexico. I'll never forget it. And I woke up and I'm all, that's the darkest dream I've ever had. Like, I woke up like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to dream that. Like, take it back. Take it back. Don't plant that into my dreams, because I was really unwell in the dream. I was just like, my eyes, I had such black rings around my eyes. I was tired. I was exhausted. I didn't even have the energy to pick up this child that I'd given birth to. And, and I'm all, this is awful. That's not me. Like, I know not everyone who might be watching this knows me, but you do. I'm like, I'm just not that type of person. I'm all, let's get on with it. Let's just give everything a bash. Like, I didn't recognize that person in the dream. But I'm all, you got to write it down, right? Because this is part of a series. So I did write it down. There was a dream before that had actually been people that I knew, South African faces, people that were actually really close to me as well, who were driving me to the labor ward, and like I say, that many dreams about it. And as I was just kind of left in this labor ward, they dropped me off, and I felt safe on the drive because they were people that I knew and trusted. And then I was left in a room to have this baby, and there was no one around. And I was calling for a doctor, and and I just was a dream of abandonment. And so that was kind of what led to then the next dream being this really dark dream. And I'm like, oh no, God, like, these are not, like, that's not fun to dream. Anyway, we were on our travel. I'd written them down. I didn't have a birth dream for a little while. We arrived in Cape Town. We arrived to beautiful people. We arrived to a beautiful city, to a nation that we called home through all our childhood, but it didn't feel like home because our home had been a different city, So, but yeah, we were so welcomed in, and I would say even loved really quickly. There was definitely a space for us, where we landed. But at the same time, we just could not settle in, like, in our spirit. And we just thought, okay. It's just because it's change. It's change. And then my parents, who are pastors, started to speak to us about whether we thought we might like to step into what they had started ministry-wise. And that would have been in a different city. And we started to wonder whether that's why we couldn't settle, whether maybe we were being called back to South Africa to, for my parents to pass some things on to us. And there was that conversation that started to happen. And my brother, who has been on staff with them for many, many, many years, we just always thought he would take everything on, because he had never left South Africa and had always been on staff with them. And but we had bumped into him in our travels. He was in America at the same time we were, and he had started talking to us, guys, have you ever thought that maybe, and we were like, well, no, yes, I don't know, because we were in this space of God starting to stir, like, there's more change than you think, Anyway, Lise, we were coming back just to see family. Bevan hadn't seen his family for, we flew straight into Cape Town, and his family are in Durban. So we're talking a 2-hour flight away. And so we hadn't been back to Durban yet when we arrived in 2018. And so we just booked a holiday to come back and see our family. And ahead of that holiday, my parents spoke to us about, would we consider having a conversation with them while we were away? And so while we were in the area. And we were like, well, I guess we could have this conversation. But the right thing to do would have been to tell our employers at the time, which were Lucinda Dooley looking after Hillsong Church in South Africa. Would just to tell them, that this is what's been asked of us, and so we just feel like let's have the conversation. So anyway, we left for Durban, and we had a conversation that just turned out to be more complicated, Lise, than we thought it would be. It like, family is so beautiful. We love our family, but it can also be complex, like, and it wasn't just family. There's other people in the mix of the ministry, and incredible ministry that my parents have started here. And it was probably a conversation that was really the first conversation that they were having about, what will happen when we pass things over, retire, if you like, at a certain age. And my brother, who felt like he was going to be living in America, that was why we bumped into him in America. Things started to change for him, and he was all, no, I'm actually going to stay. And so now it was like, oh my goodness, the landscape is changing. But of what we thought it was. And so, but we had already now entertained a conversation that meant that we had a conversation over here with our employers, and they were wanting to know, okay, what are we doing? Like, are we there, or are we here, or what is God saying? And they're quite fast movers. And so so while we were in Durban, it was just like, we'd love to have you guys. Like, it wasn't that we were kicked out of a space, if you like. That's not a great way of saying it, but whatever. It was just more, okay, let's just make a decision, and so literally we had to make a decision in a week, please, about what we were doing, whether we were going to be staying on staff in a church that we had loved and called our own and served and whatever for, would have been about 16 years, and that was our income as well. We were both on staff there. Or whether we were going to just feel like this call, not so much a call away as a call to something new, was actually strong enough in us without us even fully knowing whether it was going to be with family or not, and at the end of the day, Lise, like, there were that many dreams, that many words that we knew we had, that we were meant to leave Australia and we were meant to come back to South Africa. So, because at that point you start questioning, oh my gosh, this is all, it just was all a lot of new to have to answer to in a week. But yeah, God, again, like, super faithful. I remember getting a message from a friend who we would have pastored in London. And when I say friend, I mean people that you've loved in your journey of life will always be friends, but there's some friends that you keep in contact with a lot, and there's some that you're like, man, I hadn't spoken to her in 10 years, because we served on a team together back in our like pre-married days. And she messaged out of the blue, don't even know how she got my number. And she was all, I dreamt of you last night. And oh my goodness, hello, how are you? How old are your kids? Like, and the dream was just crazy. I'm like, how do you even know that we are in the thick of a week like this? And how do you even know that we're leaning towards making that decision? But we're super, like, it's a scary decision, but you're here to just confirm for us that we are making the right decision. And just crazy things. So we ended up at the end of that week saying we probably are going to need to step off staff to be able to step into the new thing that God is calling us into. And that was that. It was like, okay, but God, you need to show us the new thing now, which he didn't immediately, Lise.
That's nice and uncomfortable, isn't it?
And now we were in Cape Town, like, we'd only been there a few months, and there were people that we loved already in a short space of time, but we weren't going to be continuing on a life journey with them, if you like, because we're going to be moving city again. We're going to be coming like home. And and we had time to just wait out our kids' term at school. because they needed to finish the term. You need to give a term's notice, and we just had this space. And we've had space before. We just traveled for 6 months, but it's different. It was like almost unwinding from one thing, knowing we were going into something else. And this was like space of, we have no idea what is going on. We don't have a home. Our kids don't have a school. We don't know who our friends are going to be. All of our friends who we've done a lot of life with are far away, and we don't know that we haven't landed in a country that has a safety net. Like if you're out of a job in some countries, you can ask for a little bit of help from the government. There's no help in South Africa. Like anxiety levels can get pretty high here, because if you don't work, you don't eat, and we're like, oh my gosh, I cannot eat, but I can't not feed my children. Like this is real. Like, are we gonna even, God looks after all of it though, Lise, because we Hillsong Church were kind, and that they understood that we would have to just have a couple of months, maybe to figure out what we were doing. And so we were paid for that couple of months. We could pay our rent and we could feed our children. And we flew back to Australia to just finish off our citizenship. We felt like we really wanted to do that, just because Australia will always feel like home. And so we were in the process of, and so we wanted to finish that. And then we came back and we threw our kids a birthday party and packed everything into our car and drove to my parents' house. And we were like, hi, here we are after living overseas for 18 years, just trying to figure out why God has called us back. And so we navigated a bunch of conversation that had started with family, and figured out somewhere in the mix that there's just going to be too many cooks in one pot. And if God was asking of us that we were to step into some of those spaces, that he will bring about in his own time, but we can't force the timing of it. And our time, our clock was on a quicker, we were on a quicker time schedule, if you like, than they were. And it wasn't going to be fair to force that, because we just needed to get going with our life, But then who knew that COVID was going to hit, Lise? And we were all going to be waiting and stewing anyway. And you know what? I feel like in this was a moment where that dream in Mexico just became, wow, okay, God, you are trying to birth. There's something in us to be birthed. And but it was just hard, so hard. We were living with family and feeling like, oh my gosh, we don't fit. Like, I don't even know if I could say that, because we love our family and we do fit in our family. But in that moment, feeling like we didn't fit in, what the rest of my family were all doing in this nation that we were called back to, we were like, we actually have to step out of this too, we just didn't have a place of belonging, if that makes sense. We were like, we don't belong here, and we didn't belong there, and we didn't, and I know that's not true, because we always belong in Jesus, and wherever we've gone and navigated new territory, we found our place of belonging. It just wasn't, we just didn't slide into it coming back to South Africa. It was like, wow, we were going to be pioneering something new. Really, that's how it's ended up. And so you're not going to fit into something that exists if God's also asking you to pioneer something new. And it makes a little bit more sense on the other side of COVID, even now, with the way that church landscape feels like it's had so much shift and change, and the world feels like a different place. And God, we realize now, wasn't just calling us into something new, but he's been calling a bunch of his kids into new stuff, to be able to meet the new chapter of the story of the world that we're living in, but I think for us, the change of friendship and country and job and what we called spiritual family, and the rhythms that we found ourselves living in there with that, and then oh my gosh, even natural family. And just, I homeschooled the kids when we pulled them out of school, because I was a teacher before, so I'm like, I can do this, and I don't want to put them in a school and pull them out of school and put them in. And so now I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm homeschooling, and we're not earning anything, and we don't have a home, and I'm such a home person. I love having everyone over for dinner. And so it was just, everything that I would normally find footing on in life was taken away in a lot of ways. There was just nothing of any normalness ahead of COVID, that I could find my feet on. And and so that Mexican dream suddenly made sense, where I was just like, I never thought I would be a candidate for like burnout or just feeling like washed out on life, but man, tough season. And I tell you what, one of my final preachers, if you like, in Noosa, before we left Noosa, this woman came up to me, Lise, who I'd never seen before after I had preached. And there were a few people that had come up afterwards because they were asking for us to pray into some, situations that they felt that God had tapped on through the word. And so, you want to, of course, be praying for people as a pastor. But in amongst the people that had gathered up the front after the service, there's this woman who I kept looking at because she just had the most gorgeous eyes. And I'd never seen her. And so pastorally as well, I'm like, I need to make sure that I get to speak to this woman, because maybe she's new, maybe she's here for the first time, and I would just want to introduce her to some other people so that when she came back, she could feel at home. And and so I'm looking at her, and I'm praying for these guys, but I keep looking back at her, and she's just waiting patiently. And then she comes up to me afterwards and she says, I came here today specifically for you. I'm like, oh, how nice. Like, I'm thinking, I don't know what I was thinking, but just how nice, And she's all, I just feel like God would like to give you a book. I'm all, oh, well, that's also so nice. But also in my head, I'm all, we don't need books. We're packing up our house. We're shipping things. I need ebooks. Are you talking paper book? You just get really practical. But she's really adamant about this book. And it's a book called Hinds Feet on High Places. Do you know it? So it's an allegory. I had never read it growing up, and I'd never heard about it. But she said, there's a book called Hinds Feet on High Places that you need to read. And I am a reader. I'm all, yay, great. She said, I'm going to get you this book. Anyway, God knew that we were obviously in a busy season, and that it wasn't a time of like just sitting and reading books, we were trying to wrap things up and whatever. So she almost like sent her ahead, I think. And then the book arrived on my doorstep. And then she arrived back in church about 1-2 months later to check if I had read the book. And I hadn't. And she's all, I came back to find you, she says to me. And I'm all, you, oh my goodness, because I had been trying to connect her before. And so I was trying to find out, I'm like, before I leave, let me just make sure, because you're so lovely, that I'm going to connect you in. And I was trying to find out, like, where you're from, how did you even end up in church, what's your name? She could tell me nothing about where she was from or how she ended up there, or she knew no one. And no one else saw her. Lisa, I said to people afterwards, I'm like, do you see this woman? She gave me this book. No one, which is actually, like, it is strange in a church like Hillsong Noosa, because it's a pretty friendly crowd. Everyone's pretty, oh, hi, you're new, no one knew this woman. To the point that I'm all, was she an angel? Was she an angel that came and just gave me this book that, in all honesty, Lise, became like a textbook for my last few years. And I have reread that book over and over again for God to just show me there was a journey to take, and that I needed to not freak out when everything looked like it was falling apart and like we were never going to be able to stand on like sure footing again, because the story is it's an allegory, but there's a point where this little deer looks pretty close to where it's headed and where God's been taking it, and then it just does this huge dive down. And that's the part of the story that's like the Mexican dream that you don't want to read, and you don't want to dream that dream, because you're thinking to yourself, how is this little deer, like, when it ended up nearly at the top of the mountain, which is where it's headed, how has it like now almost ended up so far behind, and then it's beautiful how it unfolds, in that the journey back up is not a roundabout journey in the same way that it was in the beginning. It actually is pretty steady, pretty even-footed up. But then I don't want to give away the book, but there's this part where the little deer, okay, that the book is about, hinds feet on high places, actually has to take cover for this like freak storm that comes past, snowstorm, this freak of nature that comes past, and just has to take cover in like this, in the rocks. And I'm all, oh my gosh, that was COVID for me. We were just taking cover for a season. There was going to be a season, and then there's this beautiful moment of this deer coming out, and there's a few more things that it has to navigate, but essentially this deer ends up looking over her hometown and is in a place with Jesus where she is able to just hear from God and be able to do exactly what God's asking her to do, and maybe doesn't even have all the future before her, but has enough of this dynamic going on with God that God can speak, and she can do looking over her hometown. And Lisa, I'm going to wrap this up now by finishing all like where we've ended up, but we've ended up being asked to take on a church community, which essentially meets in the building that I grew up going to church in. My grandpa built like the kids' church rooms and the outside walls, and it's I grew up on a farm, and we left that farm town when I was in like early high school. And where my parents live now, it's about an hour's drive away, and they launched a church, and that's a whole other story for another day. And it's beautiful. Their ministry is beautiful, and it's been beautiful how my brother's been involved and how he's kind of transitioning into new spaces in that. But God was always calling us back to, I think, like where I grew up, and that town has boomed. Like it's probably the biggest boom in South Africa in terms of people relocating and development and international airport. And so this little hometown that I grew up in is not so little anymore. It's a really busy space. And there's this 100-year-old church building that another church was meeting at. And we had launched a church. We actually had our first launch service 1 month before COVID hit, which is awesome, which is why we're so grateful for dreams and words and books and angels. But we launched this church with a group of people who we didn't know from a bar of soap when we arrived in Durban. And God, I think, brought them to us, and we got to know them and ended up being able to launch a church, but lost our venue through COVID, as many people did, just because of the dynamic of, what COVID has done. And then end of last year, we're feeling like, God, seriously, like, man, this started in 2015 and it's now 2020. And we are still just feeling like things could be a little more sure-footed for us, like I'm homeschooling the kids because I'm like, oh, we've got to be mindful even just of finances when you're navigating stuff, and there's certain schools you want to send your kids to, and there's certain schools that you don't. I'm like, I'd rather just teach them myself so that they are, going to get a great education. I know I can do that, because if we were to send them to that school that we feel happy to release our children to, it's going to cost us a fortune, and we just have to be mindful, of finances when you're in the middle of change. I learned a new skill through that season. I learned how to trade. And we ended up trading and had the most incredible favor and provision. It would come through the most, I don't know, it's so crazy how God provides. But started trading, and God provided. And anyway, we have our daughter in the most beautiful school now that God has provided for. It's actually the school that I went to, and the school that my mum went to, and the school that, it's just in the family. And so that's beautiful. And we bought our land that we're waiting to build on, and we just didn't have a church building. We had people, but we didn't have a church building. And at the end of last year, we were away, and we get this, again, message out of the blue from someone in Australia who pastors an incredible church in Australia, actually, and who, a bit of a friendship had kicked up between my hubby and him, and again, wouldn't keep in touch all the time. So there's no way he should have been able to speak what he spoke into our lives, because there's no way he would have known where we were. But end of last year, he just said to us, guys, just relax. God's got it. And he said, something is coming full circle in your life. So, like, God is actually, I feel like there's a family connection, and I feel like it's a church and it's a building and it's going to be given to you. And we're all, well, that's pretty specific, because we need a building because we don't have one anymore. And, but what does that even look like? Family, I was like, I don't know how that could work, because we've stepped out of a potential family thing, in this area, and we're now going to be living in that area. And so you're really messing with where we thought we were headed now. And so we get this crazy call, Lise, like a few months ago, from a guy who pastors a tri-campus church in this province, or state, as you guys would call it. And he had actually offered us a job when we first arrived back to Durban. We did get offered a few jobs when we stepped off staff at Hillsong Church, but we really felt like we needed to just politely, respectfully say no, because we needed to understand that we weren't just jumping into something for provision's sake, but that we were actually doing, what God was asking us to do. And so we had said no to a campus pastor job, if you like, with this guy who hardly knew us, really. 2 and a bit years later, he phoned us back and he said, guys, I cannot shake that you are meant to look after those people. And if it's not in a campus pastor capacity, would you consider absorbing them into co-church and almost merging the two, if you like? And, their campus pastor had recently resigned, and he was looking at replacing that. And he felt like God had said to him, this isn't a replacement time. This isn't, you need to let go of those people and that building, and you need to actually give it to Tam and Bev. Yeah, so we get this call. We're like, God, we need a building. And that building, like I say, is where I grew up. So it ties in crazily to that Hinds Feet on High Places. And we bought our land in 2019, 5 minutes away from that building, not realizing that that's where we would be pastoring, because we were adamant we were not going to pastor in that area, because there are a few other churches in that area. And so we were going to go and take new territory where there weren't any other churches. And so, but I don't know, God, obviously that's where he needs us, and that's where we are. And and maybe just one last story. Building. So 17 years ago, okay, Bevan and I had just gotten married, and we had just done our travel, like I said, 6 months travel. We came back to South Africa just to spend a little bit of time with our family before we moved back to the UK, which is where we were working for Hillsong Church at that time in London. And in that time, we did a little trip away with Bevan's family. And it's so funny, because we were having breakfast. We were away like in the mountains, and we're having breakfast. And I am like eyeing out this other guy, which sounds really bad because I'm just newly married. I'm all, Bev. I'm sitting with his family as well. I'm all, Bev, I am so drawn to that guy. He looks at me like, sorry, what? I'm like, oh no, like not in that way, but in a way of like, I feel like we're going to work with that guy one day. And it's all, I mean, we were 25, we had just gotten married, we were living in the UK, like how are we going to work with this person who lived in South Africa, who I didn't know at all either. To the point that I think I need to go and introduce myself to him, just meet him, Kevin's all, it's really weird. It is really weird. I'm not going to do it. I didn't do it. I didn't go and introduce myself to him, because he was having breakfast with his wife, hey, and I'm sitting with my new husband and his family. And but then later on, a week later, 2 weeks later, I come across someone showing a picture, and he's in that picture, and I'm all, what? Who is this? It turns out he went to the same Bible college I went to, which my parents also went to, and my parents did know him through a mutual friend. And you know how it goes, like there's a connection. So I get his number and I'm all, I can't actually go back to the UK without phoning him, because it's not, I can do that now. I feel like I've got enough of like, this person to talk about. And so I phone him and I'm all, it's going to sound really weird, but, at breakfast, this is who I am. I'm Roger and Yvonne's daughter, let's do coffee, he says. Let's do coffee, the four of us, him and his wife and Bev and I. And so there we are. He would have been in his maybe later 30s, maybe. We would have been 25, and we're all sitting having coffee and we just chat. And I tell him what I felt. And he's all, well, let's just pray and see. So we pray and fly off to the UK and have our kids, and then get asked to go to Australia and do Hillsong Noosa, and then come back and find ourselves in this crazy space, and then get asked to take on this building that comes with people who are already gathering in that building. And we don't own it, this building, we don't own it yet. But it turns out that as it was a 100-year-old church building, it was the Anglican church that were meeting there when I was a child. It's like the only church in the area, small town. And when they moved out and when they moved into a new space, a guy by the name of Darren Owen bought the building because he wanted it to remain a church. He didn't want to see it go to waste or go to something else. And so he bought it. He's a businessman. Turns out he has that kind of finance. And he rented it to another church in the area. And then they bought it their own building. And so the church that we have now inherited moved into that space, and they were meeting there. And so when we inquired about the landlord of this new building, it turns out it's that guy from breakfast. His name was Darren Owen, and he owns the building, and he's just been amazing. And his heart was always that he would have bought it for it to be owned, not by himself, but to be owned by the church again. And so we'll see how that looks in the future. We're just restoring it at the moment, because I'm not sure anyone had done anything to that building for 100 years. So we're currently restoring it, and it's gorgeous, and it's got all my childhood memories and my grandpa's that family connection. Turns out it was my grandpa who built the surrounding walls, which I didn't even know. Oh no, this is the last story. That building, I've talked to you about James and Jane. When we flew back to do our citizenship in 2017, we're just processing the mind-blowing space we find ourselves in. Like, who would have ever thought we'd step off staff? We don't know what we're going back to, in South Africa. We just don't know. We're processing with our good friends, Jamie and Janie. And James has a moment, and he goes, guys, I've seen the church you're going to pastor. We're all, what? Like, he's all, no, I've had a vision of the church you're going to pastor. We're all, okay, what does it look like, because we would like to know. And he starts describing these white walls and this church and amongst fields. And we're all, okay, we're thinking, man, that doesn't look like anything that we could just put our finger on, But again, you hold on to those things, and I feel like I have 1,000,001 stories of things that we've held on to in these last few years. But you hold on to it, and sometimes you just have to pop it on the shelf, because it's for later. And so that one was just on the shelf. And when we got asked to step into the potential of taking on, a church that was called Olive Tree North Coast, and we were going to now absorb it and was going to become co-church. And so there was a period of 2-3 months. Oh man, all the stories start coming. Now I'm thinking of another one. But anyway, there's a period of about 2 or 3 months that it was just like we were just going to come and we were going to guest speak, and we were going to get to know the people, and we were just going to see, is this a good fit, And so we were there for Bevan to guest preach, and I'm looking for him. Like, where is he? The service is going to be starting. And he's down at the bottom of the car park, and he's FaceTiming Jamie, and he's all, James, we've been asked to take on this church, white walls, fields. And James all, oh my gosh, that's what I saw from Australia, this building that was Tam's childhood church, you know, like it's just crazy. Hey, crazy. Yeah. And crazy stories, Lise. And every time I finish one, I think of another one, and I'm all, this is going to go too long.
Isn't it just so God though? Like when you do those big steps, like you guys took huge steps and really big wild face steps, but he confirmed and affirmed and did crazy amazing things along the way to continue to let you know you're in the center of my will, you're in the center of my will, you're in the center of my will.
And it's even when you've got that, it's so crazy. Like we read the old Bible stories, hey, of the Israelites, and you think like, how come they just didn't stay on path? You know, there was so much that God spoke and did, but then you navigate your own wilderness, and God is speaking and He is doing, but it's still wilderness.
Yes.
And it's amazing, you know, how much you can question and how disciplined you have to be at arresting your thoughts and just arresting your fears and arresting all of the natural senses that rise up, because, you know, we live in a real world, like just things that you imagined.
How did you do that, Tam? So you know, you saying arresting your thoughts and all of that. What do you have some strategies that you use?
Oh man, I think the word of God, like you cannot beat it. But then there's sometimes, Lise, like there were a couple of months there when we first got back to Durban, and when we were just feeling like I said, like we had no footing or no belonging, and that was hard because again it's like it's natural family and spiritual family. It's stuff that was close to you, and let's just say that it's not anybody that was ever trying to hurt or do. It's just circumstance. It's where God's leading you, and it's what it can feel like, and it's how it can come across to you in that moment, because you think that's what should be happening, like, you know, that's how it should have gone. And if it's not going that way, like there's moments where honestly it can be even hard to read the word of God, because you're so overcome by just, this is not how I imagined life to look right now, you know? And so you're reading, but you're not even necessarily absorbing. And so at that point, I feel like it's worship. Just play worship over your soul, so that there's truth being spoken in amongst all of the enemy's lies. Because like this, we all know how he works. Like he totally targets you at your weakest. Yeah. And so, you know, you're feeling weak, you're feeling like all of the natural stuff is going amiss. And so questions that you would not normally even entertain, you know, you just have to go, you have to, I think, have had enough put into you ahead of time, which I think that's where the kindness of God rules and reigns, because he's like, all right, okay, this is going to be a tough season. You're about to walk through something tough, okay? But there is enough in you. I know there's enough in you. As I feel like the heart of our Father God. I know there's enough of the word. I know there's enough of the journey ahead that has prepared you. He never gives us more than we can handle. And so even though we'll feel like we're at breaking point, there's that stuff that you can like just draw on. But I know these promises. I know, you know, like you're coming to the end of your bank account and you are literally like, I remember being in the shops, and I'm so humanitarian at heart, and a huge part of us coming back to Africa was to be able to just see justice and mercy operate in some of the injustice that exists here in Africa. And you know, you've got someone who hasn't eaten for a few days, just hungry and asking for a sandwich, and I'm like, I'm pretty much I've bought this bread for my children. I'm going to give you half of the loaf of bread, because right now, like, that is all I've got in my bank account, you know? And so in those moments, like, at least we've never been there. We have never been there in terms of like provision having to be real. In those moments, you're like, okay, like David speaks about, I have never seen the righteous forsaken. I have never seen them begging for bread. And I'm not going to beg for bread tomorrow, because whatever, I'm going to do a great trade. And like, God is going to provide or whatever, you know. But right now, like I can go home and I can make my children their sandwich for their school lunchbox or whatever, and I can give that guy a sandwich, and it's going to be good. It's my daily, I've got my daily bread, you know. Like we have never lived day to day, like we've moved out of that season, but we lived through that season. Yeah. And you know what as well, Lee, sometimes like if we're going to pastor in a nation like this, there's a level of empathy that we actually need if we're going to be good leaders, you know. And there's some things that I don't think we could have empathized with until we maybe actually had to navigate it, you know. Because I mean, we're talking a country where the unemployment rate is so high, and we're talking a country where people are literally questioning their next meal. And so that God never failed us, but I can empathize in a way that I couldn't have before. And so sometimes, you know, we just have to appreciate that if we're saying, God, I'm putting my hand up, you know, to help or be used, like, I don't know what you saw if we don't actually have the heart, like a heart that can come in and identify at a certain level. So sometimes I have to look back and I'm all, okay, well, I'm grateful. Like you've shown me stuff that I, wouldn't have been able to see before, or wouldn't have been able, you know, I thought I would notice stuff before, but I do notice on a different level. So I think you just have to keep correcting your emotions and correcting your thinking, and, you know, and draw on promises in scripture. And
honestly know that too, though, isn't it? Like going, God, I feel this, and actually, can you help me in this?
Yeah, totally. Like, I mean, it says it in the word. Hey, it's like, I want to believe, but help my unbelief, you know. And there's those moments too where you're like, I really want to believe. I think that writing stuff down, words that God had given us, like writing stuff down, was really helpful, because there were times where I was like, it's a lot, you know what I mean? Like, we're in 2021, at the end of 2021. We came back to Durban at the end of 2018. So, you know, we stepped off of Hillsong staff in the middle of 2018. So we're talking 3.5 years. But maybe I just have to very quickly tell you this one word that we got sitting in church, at my parents' church, because when we arrived back, we just sat in church for a minute there. And this beautiful woman comes up to my mum after the service, actually, to ask, would it be okay if I passed on a word that I really felt like I had for your daughter and for your son-in-law? And she said, yeah, she trusts her. And so she was like, oh yeah, I'm cool with it, but I'll check in with Tam. And so anyway, we met her the next day. It was so kind of her, like, to go about it in that way. And she was all, guys, very specific words. She says, I feel like I'm needing to tell you that you've not missed the boat. And actually, I want to thank you. You've not missed the boat. Like you're actually, she talked about us being like a ship bringing treasure into the land from what we had carried in other lands. And so it's all good, but we need to appreciate that there's going to be space and time between. And she sees like one thing fitting into another thing, to eventually build the house that we're called to build. And whatever, she lots of detail, okay. And then she says, I keep seeing this number 1,345. Like, I don't understand it, and I feel really weird even passing it on to you. Does it resonate with you? I'm all, no. No, 1,345. In my head, I'm like racking my brain. Nothing. I'm thinking at that stage, we're just looking at where we're going to maybe live. And I'm all, maybe we'll live in house number 1,345. I don't know, you know. But then we buy a plot of land. It's not 1,345. Again, on the shelf, you know, just put it on the shelf. Maybe even forgot about it. Then, like I say, we get asked earlier this year to step into what was Olive Tree North Coast and has become Co-Church, that building that I grew up in. So we were very, we were really happy for the transition to be led by Olive Tree North Coast. We didn't want it to look like we had asked to step in and we were taking over. We needed it to be just right for the people, and a healthy transition, not a takeover, which it was. And so we asked for them to lead it. We would submit to their leadership of it. And so they did, and we ended up getting I'm actually sitting in the church the one day when we're there as guests, just, in our few months before it gets announced. And I have a moment where I remember 1,345. I'm all, oh, yes, remember that. This is now 2.5 years later. And I'm all, oh, yeah, remember that number. What does that mean, God? And he's like, that was your days of waiting. I'm all, oh, okay. So I pull up my phone and I start adding up. I'm all, okay, how long have we been waiting? And I think to myself, really, in my mind, I come up with the wait really felt like it started on New Year's Eve 2017. We had just finished our travel. We arrived back in Noosa. We were waiting to get my citizenship. We then flew back to get the kids and Bevins later on that year. But we were waiting for that. And then we were going to go to Cape Town. We were just going to wait to see whether this was the right space. And then things transpired there. And then we were waiting kind of, on my family. And then we were waiting on launching a church. And then we launched a church a month before COVID. And then we were waiting again because we didn't have a venue. So we were just waiting. And then we lost our venue. We're like, oh, we're waiting. Like, we have this virtual church. We're meeting online. We're meeting in cafes and whatever. But we're still just waiting because we've not landed yet, So I'm all, okay, that's what I feel. So I start adding up. I go back to the 31st of December, 2017, and I count 1,345 days. And it takes me to the first Sunday of September this year. It's 1,345 days, including the one leap year in there, that throws out the 365 days in a year. And I'm all, okay, we haven't had any communication now about when we would officially take over, if we were taking over. But as things unfolded, the first day that Co-Church launched was the first Sunday of September this year, day 1,345. So crazy. Crazy. Hey.
Just incredible.
So crazy.
One of the last things my grandma ever said to me, so she knew it would be the last time she'd see me because I was heading off and she was very unwell and I was traveling, and she just wrote on a piece of paper, she said, this is for you, and she handed it to me, and I've still got it, and it says, the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. And everyone's saying, before you went over to South Africa, why would you go there? La la la. Be like, you're in the center of God's will, and it's the safest place for you and your family. It's amazing. And how much He has confirmed and affirmed.
No, right? And obviously we needed it because we were that shaky at times. So I think that's where He's kind. Sometimes we want Him to confirm what we're going to have for lunch, and you're like, well, you probably don't need a million words about what to have for lunch. Just go and pick something healthy. But in the big things, He gets it. He gets it. He gets that we're going to be questioning and going, have we done wrong by our kids? Was probably the biggest thing.
The hardest.
Friends and safety, and but He.
And how amazing too, there's something in letting go of, it was safe, and it was wonderful, in Noosa, right? And but having to know, okay, that season's finished and God's made it really clear, and I have to let it go before I can take the new and what He's got for me. And you really let it go before the new came into the hands, and the in-between and the wilderness. And Tam, your story is incredible, and I have no doubt that there's lots of people who can relate to different parts of your story, and are probably on different parts of what your journey's been as well. How is there a way that people can find out more about you or connect with you or your church?
I feel like we're just so not those people. Hey, just chat with people on Instagram. Chat with whoever God brings our way, and I don't know, we've always just loved whoever God's brought our way, and but I definitely don't have like a fancy page or anything like that, because we're just not fancy people.
I love.
Yeah.
Well,
but do you remember at the retreat, that last retreat, that like one of your first retreats, that you gifted me a place on because you're so kind like that? Do you remember your words? Oh my goodness.
Yes, I do remember it. And I had no idea what was going on. So I remember this. I had a dream, and I know when it's a God dream, when God has a word for someone, because he repeats it over and over and over and over again. And it went on almost all night. So I didn't get much sleep that night. And it went like this. It went Tam, 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 courage, Tam, courage, Tam, courage, Tam, Tam, Janie, Tam, Janie, courage, Janie, courage, Janie. And it just repeated in that sequence all night. And so I just went the next morning, I think I went for a walk on the beach, and I saw you, and I'm like, oh, hey, I had this dream, and I just shared it with you. I had no idea. I had no context.
What's going on?
And it was like you were in the thick of it then, weren't you?
In the thick of it. Like we had just, I don't even know if we fully knew that Janie and Jamie were definitely going to be, I think the conversations were being had that they were going to take on Hillsong Noosa. But to be honest, it was actually only confirmed, done like the weekend that it was announced. So, yeah. So for you having that dream, I was like, oh, again, it was like, it's Janie. Yeah, she's stepping into that space, and we were knit together for a reason, to be able to hand onto them, and that was going to be fine, and there was going to be courage to go into the new. It was just more confirmation, and it's such a beautiful story of how prophetic you are, actually. So prophetic. I love how you're always obedient with it, always.
Oh, thank you, Tam. I find it so fun to just be a part of someone's story, even in a little way, just how God, wants to connect to. You just can feel his Father's heart for that person, can't you, when he wants to speak to them, and you just get so excited. So
I know.
Oh,
no,
so excited. Season, my friend. I will be definitely wanting to hear more and watching, but far out. What a journey. What a journey. And well done.
Oh, thanks, babe. Haven't come to the end. We never do, though. That's the thing. Hey, we just navigate the season, and then but it does feel like we're coming to the end. Thank you.
We're getting to the promised land.
Bevan had a word about Abraham, and guess where we were staying at the time he had it, because he just needed something at a time as well. We had just stepped off staff, and one of the first things we did after stepping off staff was we were guest speakers for somebody in South Africa, and they put us up in a really stunning accommodation, and guess where the accommodation was, what the town name was called? Wilderness. Called Wilderness. And God gave him this whole word about Abraham, and he called Abraham out, and he didn't even know where he was going to be going, and well, man, we're in the wilderness. Literally and spiritually.
Wow. Oh, friend, thank you for your story. Thank you for just sharing all of that.
Oh, thanks for chatting. I always love chatting to you, and I can't wait for you to come to South Africa one day. I want you to come do it.
So definitely coming, definitely. Oh, thank you. Love you.
Thanks for joining me on Brave with Lisa. I hope that it has inspired or impacted you in a small or large way. Feel free to comment, to subscribe, and share with some friends. And please join us next week on another conversation we will have here on this channel on Brave with Lisa.